Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon to you all, and thank you for joining us today. I am pleased to introduce to you our guest speaker, Dr. Khalid Al-Yahya, the Director of IThra program at King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture. Prior to joining the King Abdulaziz Center, Dr. Al-Yahya served as a scientific consultant for King Abdulaziz Foundation for Giftedness and Creativity. Dr. Al-Yahya received his PhD in physics from McGill University in Canada. We are delighted to have Dr. Al-Yahya with us today for his speech on the Uncreative Leader. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Al-Yahya.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm delighted to be here with you in this landmark facility. I want to get acquainted with the mouse and the clicker. Does not seem to be working. Is my voice heard at the back? I need to speak louder? Spend more calories. Does not seem to. Just forward. I'm back. This is how Pinocchio sums his motivations. Today, I learned to read. Tomorrow, to write. And the day after tomorrow, I'll do arithmetic. Then, clever as I am, I'll make lots of money. And with the first money that I get in my pocket, I'll buy my father a beautiful woolen jacket. But what I am talking about, wool, I'll get him one all of silver and gold with diamond buttons. It's interesting to see Pinocchio's motivations revolving around being pragmatic, very pragmatic, driven by materialistic aspirations. Unfortunately, any discussion about creative leadership is driven by similar motivations. We are compelled to justify our existence by attaching ourselves to an acceptable cause, raising the expectation that creativity is a highway for more guaranteed jobs, more economic stability, and more and much more consumption outlets. I want to open my presentation dedicated for a legend, the blue falcon legend. There is a legend, a child out on a walk with his father, suddenly points out and cries out, "Look, a blue falcon." The father, perhaps tired, snaps. "Don't be silly," he said. Then he delivers the crunch line. "There is no such thing as blue falcons." So the child learned the lesson. He is brought up to see the world in the terms of the grown-ups and eventually forgets that a blue falcon ever seen. Now, blue falcons fly around unseen by anyone. No one ever saw a blue falcon since then, although the legend says that blue falcons are all around us. Almost everything around us encourages us not to think, to be content with the commonplaces, with dogmatic language that divides the world neatly into white and black, good and evil, being employed or being homeless, them versus us. Coupled with that, creativity has been downgraded downgraded, has been hijacked by the sophisticated manipulation of commerce and advertisement that has transformed a considerable fraction of the population into addicts with artificial needs. Creativity in our times became a destination rather than a journey. And somehow, we do understand why. The noble solutions for a long time suffered from being intricate in a Gordian knot. No one could make a case for it. The intellectual act had no prestige whatsoever. The budget allocated to design and innovation solutions is the first to be cut. Most of our leaders are barely literate. The national values are purely economical. And all of a sudden, a creativity term came to existence along with the promise of more economical prosperity. And this was Alexander's solution to the Gordian knot, the out-of-the-box so-called approach. Lip service that's paid to the concept of creative industry became officially celebrated with a promise to effectively transform our schools and universities to becoming training grounds for the workforce instead of places in which curiosity and reflection are fostered. The common narrative of the true creative power started losing its function, losing its great hero, losing its great dangers, its great voyages, its great goal. It's being dispersed in the clouds of our narrative language. Creativity, for the sake of being called creative celebrity, became the norm. And this is not new. There has been similar times. Soon after the French Revolution, a national committee was set up under the great mathematician, the great educator, the great poet, the great astronomer, Laplace, to revise the calendar. The committee introduced the decimal calendar, the decimal time, the dime. Each week is made of 10 days. Each day is made of 10 hours. Each made of 100 minutes. Each is composed of 100 seconds. No AM or PM. They managed to take some days back and forth to compensate. It lasted for about 10 years, but Napoleon abolished the dime and went back to the classic time only because he wanted to restore relationship with the Pope. A website is dedicated to give you at every moment what dime it is. This is what happens when we have system-imposed innovation or creativity. History teaches us that big jumps in human innovation come about mainly as basic result of pure curiosity. Michael Faraday's experiments on electricity, for example, were driven by curiosity, but eventually brought us electric light. No amount of R&D could ever do that on a candle. I do have a deep concern. If creativity surrenders to the persuasiveness of aligning with the illusion of market forces, it will be dwarfed. That will lead to follow the simple solutions, the incremental ones. And it is relatively easy to be superficially illiterate, to follow a sitcom, to understand a joke in advertisement, to read a political slogan, to use a gadget or a computer. But to go further deeper, to imagine, to dissolve barriers, to ignore boundaries, to subvert the vision of the world imposed upon us, we need to approach creativity differently. Every crisis of society is ultimately a crisis of the imagination. To be more specific, I would like to highlight two challenges that are affecting the creative leadership. First is the Googleization of science. There is a risk for scientists today who live in the petabyte age. Science is being transformed to the process that involves gigantic amount of number crunching. The ability to access and process enormous amount of data is becoming the preferred mode of scientific method. The new type of investigation is revolving around being very extensive, statistically analytical, of huge amount of data, searching for nothing but correlations. And according to the para-adepts, correlation is enough. Chris Anderson summarizes the para-gospel as follows. The statistical tools to crunch these numbers offers a whole new way to understanding the world. Correlation supersedes causation. It's time to ask, what can science learn from Google? Google is definitely groundbreaking in terms of sharing and disseminating knowledge, and also for data mining in general. But the unique blend of intellectual and creative power is at risk if put into competition. Encyclopedic perfection is not on a par with learning how to ask the right question. The dictionary may contain all the words, but no one can tell a poet which to choose or what to write. The second challenge is the clueless experts. It is more sociological. The age of experts' dominance is being eradicated. With the exponential expansion of knowledge in all dimensions, subject matters are broken up into smaller and smaller pieces, with increasing emphasis on the technical and the obscure. We are observing that new professionals know more and more about less and less. We are not far from the knowledge singularity point, where a professional might know everything about nothing. Let us assume that we will talk about a typical scientist, a male scientist, just because he's typical. He's known for his intelligence, but only to a small group of specialists, numbering a few or at most a few dozen, belonging to a group that has existed only for a few decades, and there is every possibility that it may become extinct in another few decades. Specializing in a field, let's call it energy modulated electron therapy using Monte Carlo simulations. This field is which he is labeled to, by it. If one asks him what he studies, he's incapable of showing or telling what energy modulated electron therapy using Monte Carlo simulation is. And he finds it difficult to establish meaningful conversation with a large portion of humanity that has never heard of his field. This creates grave difficulties for him. He goes to conferences and on summer visits to colleges to meet people who talk his language, who can appreciate his work, and whose recognition, approval, and admiration are the only meaningful rewards he can ever hope for. His writings follow an unbreakable convention to conceal any sign that the author or the intended reader is a human being. In the age of hypercommunication, we cannot afford experts who cannot communicate. There is no room for someone who finds it difficult to have multiplicity of perspectives, flexibilities of mind, the capacities for collaboration, and most importantly, the audacity for leadership. Having said this, I don't mean to romantically find our rejoice in the comfort of the old style of environment. More than ever, we are in desperate need for people who tend to question the answers instead of answering questions. More than ever, we need leaders who depart from the role of authoritative instructors. Each leader in the new age is expected to be a little bit of a party host, part traffic cop, and most importantly, full-time enabler. The significant problems we face today cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. The turning point, or the turning points that occurred with the introduction of revolutionary ideas were not anticipated usually. No human mind was prepared to be introduced to the theory of general relativity or the structure of the DNA. Big surprises may be still in store for us. The turning points tell stories of human mind, the inquisitive nature, the endurance, the promises. The story that captures our history is narrated in a way that is different from the way the world history is usually told. Our creative history does not include Napoleon, it does not include Queen Victoria or Mao Zedong. Our creative history tells stories of liberating our minds to the extent that we can face the amazing challenges of exploring our own origins and shaping our future. But ideas are tricky business. Human cells are constantly being renewed. In 10 years, almost all the cells in you are completely different. You think you are the person who occupied your body 10 years ago. That's not necessarily true. Those cells that constitute our persona are quite different from those of 10 years ago. The cells of your body are a great deal younger than we are. Although we think we are the same person It could well be an illusion to which we are attached through habit. More importantly, the brain changes. It changes a little bit every time you see an image, every time you hear a sound, every time you feel a surface or taste a flavor or walk on new ground. It is changing right now as you hear this or not hear it. Your brain starts out with 100 billion neurons. That's about how many stars are in the Milky Way galaxy, or as many galaxies are in the known universe. The neurons do not act as computer memory sites. No cell holds a picture of your mom or the smell of a rose or the idea of you enjoying a burger. You can pull out any cell in your brain and your mind will not change. You actually could pull out a few million cells at random and not miss anything. Pull a few wires or circuits out of a computer and look what happens. The mind thinks with ideas, not information. Maybe Oscar Wilde was right. He was asked, where do you get your ideas from? I don't, he replied. They get me. All of our joys, our sorrows, our memories and ambitions, our senses of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than vast assembly of nerve cells that communicate through electric pulses. But apparently it's not a matter of size, weight, or dimension. The average brain weighs about the same as a bag of sugar. If squashed flat, it would cover 4 sheets of A4 paper. We are talking about 1.5 liters of protein and fat, the most remarkable structure in the known universe. It constantly reminds ourselves of who we are, that we are a combination of experiences, information, books we have read, things imagined. Each life is an encyclopedia, a library, a series of styles. 5 or 6,000 millions of us invest from sunrise to sunset, from birth to death, spend their lives observing, inventing, reflecting, daydreaming, lying, praying, promising, framing our words and directing our steps, resenting, loving, and worrying. Our minds constantly search for motives, ideas, purpose, and unveiling secrets. We go beyond the surface in pursuit of understanding, word by word, action after action. We know that is somewhere, the background, invisible, difficult to trace. We observe the new forming patterns, create a coherent context, find limits where our understanding fails, and ultimately make new discoveries where the unexpected happen. Our lives are narratives open to feelings of guilt, persona, anxiety, curiosity, and sincerity. We create meanings. That's who we are. We take the shade of a stick to measure the diameter of the earth. When we miss a star in the sky, we determine the size of the universe. We inject meanings and aura in our experiences. For the creative leadership falling apart at the sword of rampant market forces of the 21st century, we call for the newborn of science artists, the anti-Alexanders, to heal the wound and repair the Gordian knot. Pinocchio may turn into a boy at the conclusion of his adventures, but ultimately he still thinks like a puppet, something we might want to avoid. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid, for your lecture. And now we will open the floor for questions.
Thanks, Dr. Khalid. Really, as usual, and as expected, very inspiring. You opened thousands of doors for us to think about them. One of the issues really stopped me when I listening to your lecture is the issue about the data and information revolutions, amount of data, and you, as rightly mentioned or pointed out, the need for creating correlations and more work on finding out correlations across all this amount of data. My question is, yes, indeed, we need to look into the correlations, but what we need really in this time is interpretation, the right interpretation for the data. So how will you reflect on this, the importance of the right interpretation? Thank you.
Well, I think, as I said, the scientific community is plagued with the fact that only correlation works. The point that you are eliminating other means of scientific exploration. And basically we are losing our DNA as scientific experts if we just proceed with that approach, because as you know, like information do have half-life, and they do have expiration date. What's good today could not be good tomorrow. And attaching ourselves to the existing information and just number crunching possess a great risk, losing our skill as that's inherently embedded in our mind, the causation, the scientific method that goes into the probabilistic approaches, finding the patterns and reflecting on new frontiers are all being eradicated just because of this new tool, this new toy that's happening, and we find and we take full advantage of. I do think that the age of number crunching will also have a half-life that will sooner or later be brought, reduced to its proper and historical proportion.
Talked about basically
Well, first thing is to de-school the society. The society, the way our education system was built on theories that were designed for the 19th century, for the Industrial Revolution. Basically, you needed an expert who can operate a machine at a young age and can live long enough to be in the workforce, basically. They need to be ready to go to the work when they are 20s and live until they are 60. It's ironic that knowledge has expanded in all frontiers, and yet we have the people going to work at the age of 20, regardless of the explosion of information knowledge that has. So our educational environment and system basically supplying the market forces with graduates just for the workforce. At some point it will reach its saturation, where you'll have more people that are unemployed than the people who can. The notion of getting the Pinocchio's approach, basically, you need to learn to go to school so that you buy a golden jacket for your father, needs to be radically relooked. The tax that we are paying now and the consequences of our negligence will be catastrophical in terms of the knowledge economy and the knowledge society. So one part is to relook at why do we need to have, for example, if I want to teach, if my child wants to be an expert in nanotechnology, what does he need to study? Does he study mechanical engineering, physics? Or, basically, it's all of that. However, they need to stick to a field that will not enable them to go basically and pursue their understanding, pursue their what they want to achieve. The age of requirements for you to be an expert is becoming longer and longer and longer. You can spend your entire life just studying energy modulated electron therapy, where you can only talk to 4 or 5 people in the entire world. So I think it's these are the reasons. These are not the solutions. The solutions require a new breed of scientists who can communicate, who can talk, where what you are after is not necessarily the fact, but the idea. Not necessarily knowing every single piece of information related to a subject, but knowing a bit of everything about everything. And it will take us back from the university setup. It has to go to the mass communication means, or education has to evolve from the classroom environment to the interaction between a need for the individual to be addressed at the individual level, not at the masses approach. That's how I think of it. It's a problem of huge magnitude, and there is no foreseeable solution for it. But CAUS is definitely in the right track. Yeah. Well, yeah, King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture is founded on that. No one can possess the knowledge all in one field. It floats on subjects, and where the museum supports the library, and the library supports the theater, and theater supports the lifelong learning and the knowledge tower. We try to be agile as much as possible. I was having conversation with my colleagues earlier. To be an agile, basically you need to get the latest thinking of the world and immediately present it, not wait until it becomes a curriculum and implemented and passes through various committees until it's endorsed and approved. This process usually takes years. We try to shortcut the circuit and get the latest thinking of the world and bring it. Basically, Abdulaziz Center for World Culture, in a way, it's the web program year-long for all ages. That's how it could be defined. Mainly less in the technical part, more in the cultural and intellectual experience. So it is to create the global citizen, the rounded citizen, the one who can interact with the world and hopefully answer the major questions that are facing humanity today, and also address the challenges that are facing the 21st century.
Talal Mansour. Good afternoon, Dr. Khalid. Thanks for the presentation. It was indeed an inspiring speech. If you allow me, just for the sake of discussion, I have one element that I disagree with you, or just I have a question. It's specifically on the title you've chosen, which is Uncreative Leaders. To me, uncreative and leader cannot be combined together. They are not interlinked. I mean, managers, they are uncreative, but creativity usually will come with the leader. I will not call a leader if he is not a creative. But I'm sure you are coming, you choosing the topic, you are coming to send a message. I wonder what's behind it.
Well, if you think that there are uncreative leaders, you have never seen any of my bosses. No, they do exist, and for this I suffer, and also humanity is suffering. I think the issue is the term creativity suddenly became sort of the magic wand for people. Just use it, and then anything could be justified just because you're using creativity. And thanks to the new gadgets and tools, we think that creativity is just introducing new projects, while we are departing from the reality that creativity, I find creativity more in general relativity, revelation, and quantum mechanics. That's the pulse was stimulated in the great brains and came up with these solutions, and in a way you can consider them breath of divinity. Unfortunately, we are talking less about that, but much, much more about how to operate your functions in small organizations. And in the business sense, it is all around. Like this term, you can just use it and then proceed with any reason you want to, with any proposal you have, and you have your path basically red carpeted. It exists in the business environment, and we see it all around. And I think as you emerge in the workforce, you will see it much, much more and more. And the problem with using the term creativity by uncreative people is that will cause bigger problems than the existing ones. So yes, it is a bit, could be controversial, but we as humans are suffering just because of having a lot of leaders or who assume leadership positions, talking about creativity without adhering to its values.
On behalf of CAST, we'd like to thank you so much, Dr. Khalid, for participating in our program, and please accept our small token of appreciation. And we hope to see you in the near future, inshallah.
Have a little gift for you. Thank you so much.